Welcome to Cute Widgets and More. In an episode a few weeks back, we saw Sea Lion, and this week we'll turn to look at another IDE. It's not Qt Creator, which is my favorite, but it's Visual Studio. And to explain that to me, I brought a coworker with me today, Alistair. I pronounced that correct this time, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Alistair, Visual Studio. Can you tell me? I know a bit about what it is, but that sounds like something from the 90s, or what's up with that?
From the early 90s, Microsoft developed various visual IDEs for their various programming languages to run in Windows. And right about the end of the 90s, they brought them all together in one application called Visual Studio. And I've been using it since about that time. So yeah, it's old, but it's been in continuous development. And I think, or at least as far as I've seen, a number of the useful innovations that lots of IDEs have nowadays started in Visual Studio, and they've kept it up, and it's still, I think, a very useful application with one particular killer app about it that we'll get to.
Okay, and just for the viewers here, this is not a competition. I prefer my Qt Creator. People prefer other IDEs, and that's cool. So the idea with this mini-series on IDEs is simply to get an idea of what is out there, what is other people using. So, Alistair, show me the first feature that you really like about Visual Studio.
Well, the first feature that I like about it is a feature that's become a sort of a textbook example for other types of applications. Really, it's the way it handles dockable widgets. So this has been going on for I can't remember which version of Visual Studio added it, but it was probably sometime in the noughties. The notion that you can just grab any bit of your interface and drag it about to dock it with respect to another widget. So to make them side by side, or in order to undo that, you can drag it on top, and then it will form a stack in any particular part of the thing, not just editor windows. Here's the list of breakpoints. If you want that to be ever present down the side of your code, you can. It's a system that's been adopted and copied by lots of different other applications since. In particular, there is a library for Qt users called KD Dock Widgets, which is I think excellent reinterpretation of this idea. Yeah. So as well as that, it has this notion of pinning. So in situations like I am today, showing off my video in a much more cramped screen than I'm used to, if you unpin this breakpoints window, then it will sit down the side until you click on it to have a look, and then when you return to your editing, it pops back out of the way again. So I will just return that.
And how does that work with a multi-screen setup?
Well, as you can see here, well, I'll get rid of that. If you pop something out, it becomes a floating window of its. And if you don't dog it again, it becomes a floating window in its own right. So I can rebuild my I could rebuild my UI.
Yeah, these recordings on small screens is always a challenge. So while you're searching for that, does it have the concept of like saved setups where you have different kind of setups? So you have your debugging views, and you have your coding views and so on, or do you have to drag windows around all the time?
Yeah, it does automatically switch between different views when you're debugging and editing. It seems like it should have an option for different profiles, but I'm afraid I've never used any other than the debugging and editing views. So if it does that, I haven't looked into it.
Fair enough. And you know what? Time simply flies enormously when we do these here. So let's carry on to number 2.
Number 2 is a branded feature. Again, a thing that has been in Visual Studio for many years and has evolved. It's what Microsoft call IntelliSense, which is their branding for essentially all of the aids that they add to help you write programs easier. So the first part of it is code completion. So if you start writing anything, so start the let's spell it correctly. Start the will get me a list of a scrollable list of all sorts of things, which is filterable if you can be bothered to change that. So and then that lets you either by the keyboards or by the mouse lets you pick that. I mean that's become fairly standard in IDEs, but it was a core part of IntelliSense. And then the second feature is parameter lists. So if you type the open bracket in order to turn that into a function, you get another pop-up which lets you know that what it's expecting right now is a date of type QDate, and it also handles overloading, since C++ uses overloading and polymorphism quite a lot. By going either just up and down with the mouse or with the keyboard, you can pick the right version of that you want. Mm-hmm. So 1, 2, 1923. Another thing that it does, you can see,
Alistair, if I may just interrupt you here. Dear the Qt company, if you're watching this, can we soon in Qt Creator get that day colon, month colon, year colon parameters named out there? Oh, I would really love that. Okay, sorry for the interruption.
Inline annotations like that are, I believe, a relatively new feature in Visual Studio. I certainly don't remember seeing it before version 2022. Okay. Yeah, it also it applies to autos as well, as we can see up here. Yeah, even if it doesn't do it inline, you can hover over the various different things, and it will let you know some information about them. It also handles jumping to them. So via from the context menu, it's go to definition, which is the handy shortcut F12 in place of Qt Creator's F2, so that you can go back and forth to these things quite easily in order to look things up. In addition to that, it has an extra feature called Peek. Microsoft call a lot of things Peek, like your taskbar previews and things, but Peek in Visual Studio, if we peek definition here, this should open QDate time in a little mini editor window stuck within the main editor window. So as well as just letting you see what you're doing here, it would let you can edit this if you want to, although editing the Qt headers probably isn't a very good idea.
I am so glad that Qt Creator doesn't have that. If Qt Creator had that, I would end up in peeks inside peeks inside peeks within minutes, and I'll be completely lost there.
I'm
so can you do that?
They only allow you one. Oh my goodness, do they allow you Right, okay. So the second peak
okay, so
replaces the
that's
first peak. So you didn't quite get to, oh, no, hang on a minute. No, there is a little back button.
Oh no, now I ruined your life.
Peak inception. That's new to me. I'd only ever tried doing that once. It just goes to show how explaining how something works is a good way of finding new features.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and if you decide that you want a full file of this, then just clicking the little tab thing will open it up for editing fully. Normally, when you've edited a file, you will be able to see a little green bar here, which shows where there are changes compared to your source control repository, which is Git in this place. So clicking that gives you the final peak option of a Git diff. So right here in the editor, without having to go to a separate pane or a separate application, you can see, or at least with a large enough screen, you would be able to see the changes that you've made for the sake of if you need to revert anything or that sort of a thing. So that I do find that pretty handy.
Okay, cool. Next feature.
The next feature is one that has been around for a long time, but originally it was part of an extension for Visual Studio, which Microsoft called Productivity Power Tools. And it is a fine tool for increasing your productivity when using Visual Studio. It's called Map Mode for Scroll Bar. So you will see that down the side of my text editor and even the peak editors which popped up, I've got a big thick area which has on it what is a thumbnail of the entire document that I have open. So you can look at it at a glance and get an idea of where you are in the document and what sort of things or what sort of places. So there's an obvious feature here right at the top, where there is a great big comment, which is normally shown in this distinctive color, and you can see where there are parts of heavily indented bits of code and so on, just to get an idea, rather than having to go to say a purely logical view, structure breakdown of your code. You can just get an idea of the topography of a file for knowing which bit of it that you're in. In addition, of course, there's all of these chunks down the side, which are show you where. Well, this is the Git difference that we were talking about, and some of these other changes are. I think that one is unsaved, and the other ones are saved, possibly. This black bit up here is a breakpoint, which is currently disabled, so I can add that in. It will also show you the bar to show the precise line you're at, and if you're wanting to navigate it quickly, then hovering over it gives you a preview in this pop-up of the actual bits that you want to go to if you want to go directly to start time change there.
And I guess all of this still is much easier on a real screen resolution than just this tiny resolution we have here in this recording.
Yes, this feature, in fact, is I believe it's not active by default in Visual Studio. They've built it in. It's no longer a power tool. It is built in. But you do have to go through the settings in order to find map mode for scroll bar and turn it on.
And the final feature that you're going to talk about here, I can really relate to. I know what's coming up here, and in the years when I was on Windows and I was using Qt Creator, the one thing that bothered me the most was how slow in Qt Creator the debugger was.
Yes. If there is any one reason that you think you should use Visual Studio as an IDE, it's in order to get access to its debugger. On Windows, there is really no substitute. No matter what anybody's using for developing C++ code, they're on Windows. there is quite likely to come a time when you will need to use Visual Studio's debugger. So it's, I mean, it does everything that you would expect a debugger to do. You saw I had a breakpoint previously, and yes, you can create them just by clicking or using a shortcut or what have you. You can just step straight in, assuming I've not broken the code. I haven't broken the code, although I have floated a load of windows. Let's hide that bit for just now. Yep, so stepping through and stepping in. It all, I mean, in a lot of debuggers, you get, especially if you have lots of breakpoints and lots of local data, it can feel a bit sticky going from one line to the next. But somehow, whatever witchcraft it is that Microsoft have done with the Visual Studio integration, it just goes along much more quickly and easily, it seems to me. There are also some relatively fancy features. It will show you in Windows a list of all of the local variables, and in situations where you get maybe too many of them, it will also have this autos window, which on the one hand reduces the things that it shows to stuff that it thinks is relevant for the particular line that you are looking at, but also it will sometimes add extra data, which is, say, inside a structure. So rather than just displaying the local, if it's going several stages down into this, sometimes it will automatically add that. And another thing that it is handy that it shows you. There we go. There's a return value for the scope pointer creation here. So yeah, as well as things that are purely local, it will sometimes show you things which are impermanent things that are handy to know about.
And one of my favorite features of Visual Studio is really line 45 there at the very end, where it tells me, not entirely like a real profiling, but still I have a very good indication of, oh, that I didn't expect that to take 11 milliseconds for just doing this. This must be wrong. And obviously, you profiling as a human is one of those difficult things. But sometimes if it takes 3 seconds of something you thought was instant, then you definitely know that there's a hotspot there.
Profiling is quite a good bonus feature of the Visual Studio debugger, because not only do you get that time elapsed, but it contains, via this diagnostics tool tab, various different. Let's make that bigger. Various different profiling options. The kind of the most convenient of which is a full sampling profiler, which you can switch on just at any point during your debugging process. So I've set up a little example of that here. Double clicking on one of these tasks takes quite a long while, like a second or two, to come up, whereas you'd think that would be instant. So somebody has edited some code into that in order to make it slow down.
Wonder who that would be.
Yeah. So a convenient way to use the profiler is if you know the point at which it starts being slow. So oh, it's not in here. I have no breakpoints window because I closed it earlier. Debug Windows breakpoints. Yes, so slot event double clicked is what causes that thing to pop up. So no. If we double click on this, we'll see it gets to that point. So when we are at a breakpoint here, we can just click this little record button to enable CPU profiling. And then if we let it run, it will eventually stop. So at this point, we can pause the application. So most of that time will hopefully have been in the processing of the thing that we were interested in. So I need to open details here and make it big enough that we can see. So if we go to this call tree option, it has the option of showing a hot path. So that's the bit that's taken the longest time. And if we expand that, it will go all the way down to
Love the symbols.
Start date changed. Is taking 48% of the time. I think a certain amount of that time was spent just waiting. And so if we look into this function, rather than simply converting the day, month, and year to a Q date, it goes through all of the years and adds every day one by one, whilst doing a debug message every 30 days or so, which was sometimes it's incredibly hard to find things to slow down applications. People don't want something to go slow.
You just couldn't find a usage of calculating Fibonacci numbers in here, could you?
No. So yeah, just any time you want from inside the debugger without having to do any preparation or running any extra types of programs. You can profile your application, and for a few years now, that's been pretty much all I've needed in order to find these kind of issues.
Okay, and here's one of those things called the bridge, and you'll be amazed of the ability that I have in bridges here, because profiling this presentation is already taking too long. So I think we'll stop here, Alistair, and then I have one final and, well, a few final questions for you, but we'll do those in next week's episode. So in next week's episode, we'll talk a bit about how Qt integrates into Visual Studio. So thank you very much for this time, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you.